I'd like to call upon Reverend Kim Waite of Memorial United Church here in Grand Falls, Windsor, to do an economical blessing.
Friends, very much like our Indigenous siblings, very few people remember like Church remembers. We are very pleased and proud as a Christian Ministerial Association to be represented here today. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for remembering and appreciating heritage. Friends, as I offer this blessing, I do so as a representative of a Christian tradition. The words that I use will be as such. If it is not your tradition, please feel welcome and maintain an attitude of respectful silence. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God of history, the now and the things to come, We thank you for all that we have in our memories, the good and the bad that has made us what we are. We ask your blessing upon this place, what it represents, what it will come to mean in the future. We ask your blessing upon those who have built it on sweat and muscle. We ask your blessing on those who will maintain it with love and respect. And we ask your blessing on this town as we go forward to change and develop and become everything that you would have us be. We ask these and all things in the name of the great Creator. Amen.
We pay particular homage today to the Beothics who lived on this very area. Today, the province is home to many populations of Indigenous and other peoples, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse cultures of the Mi'kmaq, the Inuit, and the Innu people. It's my pleasure now to call upon the town band, under the direction of Mr. Lindy Witt, to do O Canada and the 2 verses of the Ode to Newfoundland.
Chilida, Guadasi, Bejidayo. Mi'kmaq words to say, all are welcome. I am happy you all arrived. This is a joyous day with the celebration of the official opening of the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Center. Qalipu First Nation congratulates all the volunteers whose near 3 decades of dedication and work have made this place possible. The heritage refers to something passed down from preceding generations, and it also refers to birthright, which for our family is dual in nature. Our Indigenous bloodline is tied to my mother's father, Louis John, often called Louis. Pop identified himself as a Mi'kmaq Indian, thus you will hear me use his words. Grandfather was here before it all began in 1905, as he worked with the Nova Scotian entrepreneur Harry Crow, who enticed the Harmsworths of London to come here and build and operate a newsprint mill for over 50 years. Matty Mitchell, the great-grandfather of Hallaboo's present chief, Brendan Mitchell, was also here in those early days. Employed by the paper company, he discovered the initial ore deposit near Buckens. That mine failed, but later it led to the long-lasting Buckens Mines, owned by the A&D Company and operated by its 50-50 partner, ASARCO. In the dirty 30s, profits from that mine saved the mill from closing down. Thus, two Micmac Indians are directly connected to this town's heritage. American anthropologist Dr. Frank Speck visited Badger in 1914, and grandfather was one of the Indians he interviewed for his published report. Most importantly for our family, grandfather's life story was published in the Evening Telegram in 1957. It was written by Rocky Scholstead, who lived in Grand Falls at that time. The history of the Johns continues to unfold for us due to the diligent research of Pop's great-grandson, Bill Dugan. Bill's submission, Hallaboo, Mi'kmaq word for caribou, was chosen as our band's name. This center has Louis John artifacts, and his great-great-grandson, Benjamin Jeans, is a summer employee. Barkers were in this area by 1921. My grandfather, Robert Barker, had a logging camp in the Badger area. My father went to work at 12 years old in the woods, and later he and his two brothers became employees at the mill. My father and my brother Lou as well both retired from the mill. The mill took its toll on the John and Barker families. In 1957, Louis' son Peter was severely injured and forced into retirement. Sadly, my father's 32-year-old brother Jim, along with two other men, were killed in the mill in 1937. Canada and Newfoundland made a terrible mistake in 1949, denying the existence of Indigenous people living on the island and in Labrador. Some people still cling to that denial. I often wonder how things might have been different for grandfather and his offspring if recognition had been done properly in 1949. Meanwhile, the acknowledgement of Indigenous people in Newfoundland and Labrador has caused a resurgence of identity, pride, and cultural activities. One such example is Splik English for Exploits Language Centre on High Street, which is coincidentally directly across in the Bank of Montreal, the site of the former town park, where grandfather in his old age would often sit and talk to anybody that would listen about hunting, fishing, trapping, and guiding. Pop called it Sit-Down Pond, which is the name of an actual pond 80 miles southwest of here. In Mi'kmaq, it is known as Ulnu-Ibit, meaning Indian sit-down pond. This heritage center houses the story of the people, the Indigenous, those from the Bays, Canada, USA, and Europe, who settled down in the wilderness to make this place their home. As we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, we should be proud of the good things they did and dedicate ourselves not to keep repeating their mistakes. My cousin Bill recently interviewed a very elderly man in Badger who knew grandfather from the days of hunting on the Gaff Topsails. The Badger man told Bill, "Old Louis said to me, 'Don't matter what you are, Leonard, my son. Everyone should be treated equal.'"
Heritage is a legacy, an inheritance that we have to be proud of. I just want to take you up on one of the natural parts of heritage, which is the beautiful Exploits River. There were a lot of exploits done on that river. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good, some of them were horribly bad. In 1768, John Cartwright was one of the first explorers of the white people who came here to go up the river. He was looking for some Beothics. He found none, but he found lots of their mamatiques and wigwams, and he did a map of the river with the extension of what was then called Lieutenant's Lake. After him, David Buchan went up the river, and he found some Beothics at the end of what was then called Lieutenant's Lake again. It was a good start to it, but it ended up horribly bad. He lost 2 of his Marines, and the Beothics lost complete trust in these people. When he came down, he sat down there on the way back and visited the Grand Falls and was tremendously amazed at the sight of that beauty. Then in a few years later, 1819, John Peyton went up the river, John Peyton Jr., with a ghost of men, and they found some Beothics at the end of Red Indian Lake called them. Tremendous bad day for everybody. Demesduit was captured. She had just given birth to a little person. She passed it on, but she was captured and taken. And when her husband, Nanusabesu, tried to save her and to get her back, a battle broke out and he was killed on the lake. One of the truly great heroes in Newfoundland and Labrador history, who will eventually be recognized as such, no question about it. Finally, visiting the lake was Alexander Murray, a great geologist who came here in 1871. And when he finished his geological survey, he had this to say about the river. With a splendid river, abundant timber, and a fertile soil, the region that is now a wilderness might by energy and enterprise be soon converted into a thriving settlement maintaining a large population. The next person to sit on the falls, or by the falls, and camp there was a chap named Mason Beaton. And he was one of the head honchos for the Harmsworth people. He sat on the falls and he was impressed with the potential for the development of hydraulic power at the waterfall. This site, he felt, was ideal for a paper mill. It was only a few miles away from the railroad, 20 miles from a deep water harbor, had economic and hydraulic resources ready for development, and above all was on the bank of a river with the largest watershed in Newfoundland. This was the start of the dream of the outsiders, the Harmsworth brothers, and from there it went. Finally, in January of 1905, the agreement was signed with the Newfoundland government. Sir Robert Bond was the Prime Minister at the time, and they were given 2,000 square miles of woodland, full water and mineral rights at an annual ground rate of $2 per square mile. In exchange, the leaseholders were required to invest $1 million, 250 on one or more paper mills within the following 4 years, and an additional sum of $750,000 over the next 20. People were pleased and not so pleased. Some people felt really bad about it. But the government passed 3 addendums to it to remedy what the people were feeling. First of all, they said that everybody had the right to fish, hunt, and shoot and trap over the area that was given to the Harmsworth. This satisfied a lot of people. It also granted free from the demised premises sufficient land for all church and school premises, and that was provided by the Harmsworth. And also, the leasee would have no excessive rights to hunt caribou or to herd moose or caribou in this particular area. With all of these things in place, the people started to flood in from the outports. They came from a society that was cashless, that was a trunk system based on what the fishermen got in the end of the year and how much the merchants were allowing to get back. And they came to this area to pick up work and to get, for the first time in their lives, for some of them, cash. something to put in their pockets to say. It was a tremendous feeling. And with that, and this influx of people coming to the area, I'd like to call upon the Mayor of Grand Falls, Windsor, Mr. Barry Manuel, to bring greetings to the group.
Proud moment for me to be here today on this special occasion. You know, I look around the crowd here, see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of history in our community. I was born and raised here. I see former mayors, I see former councillors, I see teachers, I see people who worked in retail stores, I see people who I've known from sports. And when I think about the stories that have been told already, how many stories are there here connected to our history and to the mill particularly? And I'm sure there are literally hundreds of stories that we could tell. Myself, my two grandfathers had a connection to the mill. My grandfather, Nick Elward, went to work in the mill when he was 13 years old. 13! And he was part of a group that went to Mexico at the time for training and came home and worked here his entire career. My grandfather, Alec Manuel, he worked in the mill in the woods department. Prior to that, he worked in logging camps as a cook. And he would, what he would tell me was the only guy in his graduating class in high school, because everybody else was working, he would read and write letters for the men in the camps. And I know him and a lot of others have been interviewed, and the stories have been recorded by our Heritage Society and all the dedicated volunteers and all the dedicated people who have worked so hard to get to this moment. And I mean, I've been on council now almost 10 years, and before I was elected, the Heritage Society were looking for a new home. And it has been a goal of all those connected to get to this place that they're going to call their home. And I invite you all to take a look around inside when you can at all the beautiful artifacts and all the things that they've kept, much too much to be able to put all on display. And I'm sure there'll be some rotations and that sort of thing. But I just want to congratulate the Heritage Society and all those who are so dedicated to preserving our history. Such an important thing that must be done. And these people are as dedicated as anybody that I know. I'd like to welcome the dignitaries and special guests here. I'd also like to acknowledge my council colleagues who are here, particularly Deputy Mayor Mike Brown. Mike has been our representative with the Heritage Society for the last number of years, and I'm sure the Heritage Society would agree that Mike has been a very good representative and is always there to help. And actually, you see him running around here today, I think, taking care of a few things. So thanks to Mike. It's a good weekend for Heritage, as I'm sure you've heard by now. Yesterday, after many years of meetings and negotiations and lobby efforts, we had the pleasure of having Minister Lovelace in town to officially pass over the Grand Falls House to the town of Grand Falls, Windsor. And for us, again, that's something that has been ongoing for a long time. It's going to be a place that we can remember our history. It's one of the remaining structures. It's a part of this beautiful downtown that surrounds our Exploits River, which is the reason why we're all here. And I know it's been my dream for years, and others share that dream, that we want to connect these roads. We want Scott Avenue and Tulip Drive connected. We want people coming into town. We want Parkland down here. We want the Grand Falls House, the Heritage Society, the Salmon Interpretation Center, the many things on the river that is going to cause people to want to come to Grand Falls, Windsor, and is an opportunity for us to celebrate the history of our people, of our town, and the Aboriginal history, of course, as well. So with that, I don't have much more to say. I know they've got a lot of other speakers. I hope I didn't leave anybody out, but I do, again, just want to acknowledge the Heritage Society. Lucian Forbes, I can point out Butch, who's been president for the last few years, and I know I work closely with Butch on a number of projects, and I know it's a proud day for him as it is for everybody here. So thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful day, and we look forward to more good things to come down around in this area of our beautiful river.
In 1906, all the forests were cleared in this area, and the staff house was erected, and a small school was built. The winter of 1907 was very stormy, but construction continued all during the winter, and by the spring, 50 houses were built. On the other side of the tracks, usually that's where a lot of us lived back in those days, Grand Falls Station was started as well. And the people who came there had no permanent jobs or anything to do, but they came here to find work. In 1905, in Grand Falls Station, the first two merchants set up, Burry and Stewart. In 1909, the first hotel was started by a man named Maidment. And the first house was built and lived in 1910 by a shoemaker named Martin Anderson. Bond Street in those days was supposed to be the main street of Grand Falls Station. But the merchants were wise, and they knew if they put their fronts on Bond Street, their backs would be to the railway station. And they knew that this is where their commerce was coming from. So they built with their fronts on Main Street and their backs on Bond Street. In March of 1907, an American engineer arrived, and with the direction of G. Hardy Avenue, the architect of the A&D Company, a dam was built. Two hotels, the Exploits Hotel and the Aaron House, were constructed. And still they found they needed more space for people, so two other hotels were built, the Cabot House and Columbus House. Town Hall was built in 1908. It became the center for the whole town. And in 1909, I watched yesterday as Grand Falls House was turned over to the town. In 1909, Tom Brown was brought in by the Harmsworth people to do two things. In 1906, he had built the log cabin house for Lord Northcliffe, and now he was instructed to build the Grand Falls House. He hired 300 men, and in 9 weeks, Grand Falls House was constructed and ready for Lord Northcliffe, who was coming for the opening of the mill. My pleasure now to ask the member for Exploits, Mr. Pleeman Forsey, to bring greetings.
First of all, it's certainly an honor to be here, to stand on the land that the Beothuk once stood, as we continue our reconciliation with the indigenous. Exploits, I'm also very proud to be the member of the Exploits District. I've heard that name said a number of times already, from the Exploits River right down to the Exploits Bay. The name itself contains so much heritage, and I'm proud to be the member of the Exploits District. Again, I'd just like to thank the members of the Heritage Society. I know there was a lot of work put into this to give us this good building that we can come, reflect, remember on how this town was built, families that created it, and the history behind it. So, and we all know that Grand Falls Windsor, of course, has a lot of heritage, and to be in this building that we can come and see this at any time we like, it's certainly a privilege. So again, thank you for having me. Congratulations to the committee and the town of Grand Falls Windsor on the Heritage Center. Thank you.
A lot of pride goes into this folded piece of paper, doesn't it? We all know it. I want to thank everybody who set this up today and made it possible. I want to thank the band. Great looking bunch, there's no doubt about that. You sound great. We're here today to celebrate the history of Grand Falls, Windsor. In order to celebrate that history, we must first recognize who brought that history. That is our ancestors. You know, we may be great, but we are only great because we have stood on the shoulders of giants. Those giants, if you ever want to thank them, are at the War Memorial, just up the street. Our Aboriginal past and the former mill workers who put it all on the line and built our hospital. Those are our ancestors. Today, we have an amazing opportunity to get a glimpse of our past, to look through this window and see what has gotten us here today. We can look through this window and we can see the honor, the integrity, the hard work, and most of all, the resilience of the people of our past. I call those the four pillars of Grand Falls, Windsor. It's gotten us here today. And I want to recognize all those who have come before us to give us this opportunity today to say thank you. And I also, most importantly, want to thank the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society for opening that window so the world can see what has brought Grand Falls Windsor and given it a prestige as one of the most beautiful communities in all of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I am so very proud and honored and privileged to be the MHA for Grand Falls Windsor Buckins. It is truly an honor.
January the 29th, 1910, and Harmsworth decided he would give free paper to the publishing companies who were making the various newspapers. This was done, and the Evening Chronicle in St. John's said it this way: "This issue is printed on native paper manufactured at the Harmsworth Mills in Grand Falls, the primary paper-making enterprise in Newfoundland." What was interesting to note about the paper was that the advertisements that were carried in it. For example, men's cloth and tweed hats were 25 cents. Soup was 8 cents a can. Ladies' heavy quilted white cotton drawers were 32 cents. I think we should all run out and get a pair. Gramophones came in at $30, and Columbia records were 65 cents each. Much like today, politicians are invited to all of these big events. They didn't have to be invited in those days. And in March of 12th and 13th of 1910, every one of the politicians in the House in St. John's came to Grand Falls to view this tremendous enterprise and the economic development of the area. They stayed at the log house of Lord Northcliffe and at Grand Falls House, and they were amazed for 2 or 3 days. Then, of course, came World War I, and a lot of people from the mill, from the town, enlisted and served their, in those days, king and country well. When you look around the town today, and this is a part of the heritage, very much a part, you have to look at the street names. Beaumont, tremendous battle in World War I, Beaumont Hamel. Look at Monchy, Monchy-le-Pré. 460 Newfoundlanders were either killed, injured, or imprisoned at the Battle of Monchy. We've got Suvla, the Battle of Suvla Bay, when the Newfoundlanders were brought in to try to salvage what was left of a bad mistake of Sir Winston Churchill. We've got Hague Road. Now, there are some differences about that one, but Hague Road, named after the commander who led the forces during the war. And we've got Polygon Road. These are all names that we should be teaching our children as to what they mean and what they represent. Again, the street signs, those that are white with poppies on them. Tremendous sacrifices by people. I'm thinking of the Goodyear family in particular. 5 sons enlisted, they lost 3 of them in the war. In the Second World War, the Conways lost 2 sons. These are street names that you see on there of people who served or families that served and need to be done. After the war was over, everything was going good, and then in 1922, Lord Northcliffe died in August the 14th. He had been a tremendous person for this area, for the whole of Newfoundland. But as he died, he left a legacy to the people. And in his will, he said that anyone who had been in the company for at least 3 continuous years prior to his death would receive an amount equivalent to 3 months' pay. So he thought about the people who worked for him and thought about what they represented and who they were and why they were important to the town. My pleasure now to call upon the Honorable Elvis Lovelace, the MHA for Fortune Bay Cape Lejeune, Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and the Minister responsible for the Public Procurement Agency. Mr. Lovelace, please.
As I said, it's a pleasure to be here today. Premier Furey was unable to make it, but this announcement today, the grand opening, and yesterday, certainly a very important file to him and the Premier's office here. And he told me that to let the people know he will definitely be touring the time around because it's, as I said, it's very important to him. So to the executive and board members, it's certainly an honor to be here and to share with you. There's a vast history here in this town, and the work you do to inform and educate so many people is incredibly important. Not only is there a lot of history in this town, but also this particular part of town here near the Exploits River and the role that it played in the history of our province, the forest industry, and the paper industry. So congratulations, certainly, to the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society for the grand opening of your new Heritage Society building. And it is only fitting that your Heritage Society building be located here on the former Abitibi Mill site. I know people have been talking about attachments to Abitibi Mill, and my father was a logger. I was talking to Ron before this started, and he was referencing the woodcutters down on the south coast from Seal Cove, and some used to say they could work themselves out of a job because they were great workers. But they worked hard as well. They contributed to the success of the mill and for years and years. And as I said, yesterday was a great day, good news for this town, this region. And here where we're standing, there is certainly more work to be done. The Heritage Society is looking for more land, and I can assure you that as minister, we will be working with them to help them out, to bring it to fruition as well, as they want to do more here. And I'm certainly going to work with them and work with all involved to make it happen, just as we did with the land transfer yesterday. And as I said yesterday, working together, we can get results, and it does make a difference. So thank you all for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the burgers and the hot dogs. Thank you.
In the fall of the year, this young man and young woman went in on one of the bogs to pick some bake apples, and mostly to get some partridge berries. Nothing was bad about today, except that a few months later you could see the result of what had happened on the bog that particular morning. The young fellow was distraught. He went to his mother and father, and they had nothing to do with him whatsoever. They said, no, you've made your bed, no pun intended, and you have to lie on it. He went to his maternal grandmother, and he told her what happened on the bog that morning. And after a little while, she looked at him and she said, my son, you'd been better off you bought you a little bit of jam. In the town of Grand Falls Station in those days, commission government was on the go. We had lost our responsible government, and commission government were very concerned that the town of Grand Falls Station was not progressing very well. There were a lot of problems with the sanitary stations in there, no layouts of the roads, wells were there, outdoor toilets were everywhere, and so they came out to see what could be done. There was a lot of confusion, but the delegates were sent to St. John's in 1937. J.A. Spencer and Paddy Brown went in, and they requested that the settlement would be proclaimed a self-governing body. Commission government came through with that request, and a meeting of the residents to discuss the draft bill that was drawn up was held in 1938, and they voted 208 in favor and 12 against for the settlement to be incorporated. They then had to choose a name. A lot of people wanted it to be Grand Falls Station to keep the contact. A lot of people wanted it called Bonneville in memory of Sir Robert Bond. But some people wanted it to be called Windsor. And so they asked commission government to write to the royal family and request permission to use the name for their town. That came through, and a turret was sent out, the official seal of Windsor, and on November the 1st, 1938, Windsor became the first municipality outside the city of St. John's. It was a tremendous day for the town and a tremendous day for the area. It's my pleasure now to call upon the MP in Ottawa for the District of Coastal Bays, Central Notre Dame, Mr. Clifford Small, to bring greetings.
I'd like to thank the mayor and town council, elected officials, members of the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society, the people playing the music here today, our Indigenous guests and partners, and all of you guests for coming, and thank you for having me be here to represent the House of Parliament of Canada and to congratulate you on your tremendous achievement in the opening of the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Centre. I know a lot of work goes into a project like this, and there's a lot of hours by volunteers that go unnoticed, and oftentimes the volunteers wonder, why am I doing this, or am I appreciated, or could I be doing something else to further my own life or career? But thank you very much to the volunteers. Nothing happens in a project like this without the tremendous work of the volunteers. And Grand Falls Windsor has quite the history and quite the heritage. And for thousands and thousands of years, our Indigenous people thrived in this region and are well known historically and throughout the world. And as we move forward with a meaningful reconciliation, we look forward to our Indigenous peoples thriving once again, as they rightfully should. Now, there's not a whole lot that I can say that hasn't been said before, so I'm not going to keep you very long. Everybody's hungry. Looking forward to those hamburgers that we're all smelling. And so, everybody, enjoy the rest of the day and be proud of what's taking place here right now. Thank you very much.
He has donated one of his paintings to commemorate this official opening. Dr. Harvey was born in Grand Falls, Windsor, and to Tom and Annie Harvey, nee Blackmore, and he enjoyed drawing at a very early age. After graduating from school, he went to study engineering, and he was really taken with drafting in particular. For his final exam, he drafted an illustration of a screw jack for moving houses. That's been in his house for a long period of time, but he's also given that to us now here as well. He then decided to pursue a career in medicine, and he entered a pre-med program in St. FX, and then enrolled in Dalhousie University. After that, he went to work in Gander in 1966, and 2 years later he returned to Grand Falls to practice medicine for the next 48 years. He began painting 50 years ago. His favorite style is realism, and in the painting today, which you'll soon see, a beautiful print, and it's very apropos, of Grand Falls House that he is donating to the Heritage Society. Neil Harvey has also designed the logo, which you see, of the Heritage Centre. So without any further ado, I'd ask Dr. Harvey if he would come forward to make the presentation to Audrey Burke, the collection managers of the Heritage Centre.
Doctor, please. Thank you. Love it.
ArtX provided a diverse collection of high-quality art experiences throughout this region, but because of COVID, the festival had been cancelled since 2020, and a decision was made last year to dissolve the organization. As a result, there was a lot of painting supplies and arts and crafts, and on behalf of them, they have donated these to the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Centre to assist with the startup of visual art historical education programs that will be started hopefully in the near future. In addition, the ArtX people commissioned a watercolor to be given to the centre by the local artist from Grand Falls, Windsor, who you know very well, Mr. Christopher Peat. Mr. Peat, the painting that he's given is entitled Cobb on the Corner and is being donated today to the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society. Also, Hunter's Framing donated the framing for Christopher's work today. So I would call upon Nellie Wall and Robert Lodge to come forward to present to Audrey Burke. Since first film was occasioned, and we were very pleased with that. Of course, Gordon Pinson's a native son of Grand Falls, Windsor, and of course the Arts and Culture Centre has been named after him. We thought about maybe he might want to say something, And we contacted Mr. Blaise Pinsent, who was a nephew, and sure enough, Blaise came through, talked to him, and he would like to present a message today from Mr. Gord Pinsent. Blaise Pinsent, please.
Good day. Several years ago, I traveled to St. John's, and I picked up some photos from a friend by the name of Doug Late, who used to be a CBC broadcaster. And Doug said, I don't know if you recognize what's in these pictures, but he said, I think I know what's there. And the photos were about 2.5 to 3 feet long each, probably about 8 inches high. And they were of the construction of the paper mill. And they were in the original frames from when they were framed when the construction happened in 1905. Doug asked me if I knew anyone that would want these photos, and I brought them up to Barb Smith at the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society. And I personally would like to thank Barb for allowing me to do that and also eventually become a president of the Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society, succeeding Barb. So it's also kind of a coincidence that as a former president, the Heritage Society is now in my former office. I left a couple of loonies in one of the desks. I hope they're still there. In being approached and asked if I could bring a message from my uncle Gordon Pinsent and Ron Smith's uncle, I reached out to him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, you know, give me a call back and I'll think about it. We ended up having a nice long, hour-long discussion more about the history of Grand Falls Windsor and our family and what it meant to be from Grand Falls Windsor. And it was a true delight for me because you know, he's the last living member of my father's family, and it was a great experience for me. Gord did provide me with a message, and we did it over the phone, and he said, since how you used to work for the Advertiser, I'll provide you with some editorial license. I think you'll find that there was nothing I needed to change. There was much more to Grand Falls Windsor than the mill. There was more than the river, more than the forest. It strikes me in a way that we were a unique group of rough-hewn personalities who were brought together in an undetermined story. It is a story that all the citizens of Grand Falls Windsor have shaped together. But neither of our founding fathers could have dreamed or would have imagined that our collection, our community of personalities would possess all the elements needed to take on what was asked of all of our families. And it resulted in an unmatched beauty. The Grand Falls Windsor Heritage Society is built from that pride and the aspects of life that Grand Falls Windsor are instilled in us all. I personally, and I know this from speaking to Gord, that he is still anchored, his heart and his mind, in Grand Falls Windsor. I personally would like to congratulate the town of Grand Falls Windsor and our people for keeping the history of our garden town of the interior in good stead. You are the caretakers of a living record of lives lived. Thank you.
Good morning, and it's a great day. Special guest, welcome. We just went through a detailed and interesting history of Grand Falls, so I see no need to go all that again, and I won't. But what I would like to do is tell you about some of the people and their expectations. These people came in to the woods, and they cleared a town site, and they did so because the word was that this company actually paid in cash, and they weren't used to that under the old Fish Admiral system, where they never ever got anything. And one of the things they saw was an opportunity for their children not to be where they were all their lives. And they used that money, and they came into the town, and they attended the excellent schools that were set up in Grand Falls. When this company set up the town, it had an aim for the people and a style of life. They brought in teachers from Canada, from England. They brought them in from wherever they could get the best teachers with the best curriculum. And if you look back at the people you know in this town, they were very successful. We have produced artists, Jed Blackmore, Gordon Pinsent. We have produced policemen. We've produced doctors. And all of that came out of people who came into a wilderness to try and improve their lives and the lives of their family. One of the things I know somebody talked about one time, he said his wife was pregnant and got in trouble. And they got a team from Goodyear's, team of horses, take taxi, and he took her to a hospital to see a doctor. He said that he knew for he was the first one in his family in 200 years to see a doctor, because where he come from, there was no doctor. And if your wife got in trouble, you put her on an open boat and you took an hour's steam to the nearest harbor or cove where there was a midwife. So we bought this company bought that level of care to this town and added that to the province. One of the benefits to the province. I think all the time about the benefits that this province, this rock, this island colony has gotten from this mill, as sometimes we don't stop to appreciate. When they bought in paper makers, for an example, from Quebec and England and Ontario, they bought their wives with them. And all of a sudden, a place where there was nothing, there were drama clubs, there were choirs. And our whole culture got enriched. Then we had people go overseas, and they came back home with war brides. Well, those women came from great cities such as Birmingham, cultural centers, and they brought all that into the forest. And they taught our people, and they shared it with us. And you had things like the North Cliff Drama Club, the Little Theater. And the contribution to the island was absolutely marvelous. When I came to work here in 1966, there was 1,528 people on payroll. All of them paid their taxes, contributed to the province. The mayor mentioned his grandfather, Nick Alward. He said he went to work when he was 13. I said, that dates me pretty good. I worked with him. Nick Alward, by the way, retired machine tender on number 3. Get this, 51 years, 9 months service. That's an astronomical amount of time with one employer, you know? And that's the kind of dedicated workers we had. And this area got wholly developed. Windsor came out of Grand Falls being here, which was a real plus. And people in Windsor, their contribution was great. I often think about Cone and Riffs. How many young girls finished school, didn't work at Cones or Riffs sometime along the way before they got married and after they got married? Almost all of them did. And that was a great contribution to the area. And by the way, the Brown Derby restaurant is still the Brown Derby Wholesale and is still operating today. It's probably 80-year-old business, a contribution from Windsor. So the contribution to the province has been great. And I had the pleasure, as he said, of working with the loggers. And I look at that as a contribution. This mill here employed people in 51 communities in Newfoundland. In Seal Cove, Fortune Bay, I had 71 full-time loggers and silviculture workers. And Kings Point, Green Bay, Badger, Millertown, and all the way from Hare Bay to the West Coast. Towns had people who depended on the mill in Grand Falls for employment, who raised their kids on wages they earned from the mill in Grand Falls, and who just contributed greatly to the whole province. The contribution of this mill has been wonderful. You know, when I look at it now and it breaks my heart to see her down, but who expected it to last 100 years, never mind beyond 100 years. But you know, the pleasure on my part, of course, when I went around organizing the loggers, I met some of the nicest people in the world, I can tell you. And one fellow chipped in to help us out was a fellow by the name of Wayne Budgell from Triton. So we were in the office one day and Wayne was signing a document, and he signed it, C.W. Budgell. And I said, why would you do that? If your name is Wayne, why would you sign the C.W. Budgell? Well, boy, he said, here's the story the way my brother Don tells it. He said, when I was born, he said, we had a new Salvation Army captain come down from Ontario, and he never quite had the Newfoundland dialect down right yet. And he said, Mom took me off to church to be baptized. So she was sitting there and she was tired. She had just had a youngster. And the Salvation Army captain from Ontario said, and what do we call this child? And she thought about it. She said, Colin Wayne. So Buddy baptized him Colin Wayne. You know, there was all kinds of nice people and culture. We had a fellow here in Grand Falls. I'm way off the subject now, but it don't matter. I had a fellow here in Grand Falls everybody affectionately knew as Uncle Dougie Fudge. And Dougie worked in the mill and he got his arm sawed off at the elbow. And of course he couldn't come back to work anymore. And they were home one night and they were all playing cards in the kitchen. And the young fellow said to him, Uncle Doug, did it hurt when you lost your arm? He said, hurt. My son, he said, I didn't even know it was gone. I picked up the wheelbarrow and tipped it over. But this area has made a wonderful contribution, and I want everybody to remember this mill, though down, is still making a wonderful contribution to this province. When this mill went down, it had power production of 114 megs of power. The government of the day, in their wisdom, expropriated or nationalized the whole thing. That power is still being produced today. That power is still going into the grid today. Hydro is still making money off that power today. And we're not talking Muskrat Falls, we're talking Grand Falls. This was a free project they got by taking and probably the cheapest power in the province. And Grand Falls is contributing every day to the power system in this province. And you should know that, and everybody else should realize that. This mill is not dead. Unfortunately, it stopped production of paper. But I put a lot of years in the mill. It was a good place to work. I worked with wonderful people. My grandfather was oiler foreman. My father was a quality tester and then moved on to personnel. I worked fast machining, worked on the paper machines. Found it the hottest place in the mill to work in those days. You couldn't touch a guardrail or anything. It was all too hot. You'd burn yourself. But it contributed to my life, and I'm very grateful to Grand Falls. You know, Windsor, of course, when I grew up, Windsor was a different town. It was separate. But I spent a lot of time in Windsor. I used to go to Windsor all the time. I was going out with a girl out there. I won't mention her name and embarrass her, but anyway, I was going out with a girl out there. And I always said I was the only fellow from Grand Falls who went out with a girl from Windsor. Her brother never beat me up and her dog never bit me. So, but what I ain't going to do is I ain't going to stop. You've been sitting a long, long time. I ain't going to stop. And I want to thank you for coming and thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I hope you have a wonderful day. And by the way, that whistle stopped blowing in that mill in 2009 after 100 years. Heartbreaking. But we're going to change that here today. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to give a special thank you to the Vice Chief Andrew Barker and Cavell Gay, Minister Lovelace, MHA's Pleeman Forsey and Chris Tibbs, MP Clifford Small, and Mayor Manuel. Thank you to those who have taken the time to speak today. I'd like to acknowledge the Legion and their participation here. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the seniors that have attended. As joining us is Walman Blackmore, Paul Hennessy, Wilf Maloney, and Cliff Thomas, and anyone else that I may have missed. A helping hands thank you to the contributors to getting the mill whistle operable. The Newfoundland Helicopters Limited for the compressor, Bluebird Construction for the tower, Dawes Mechanical for the assembly, pipeworks, and testing, Town of Grand Falls Windsor's Electrical Department for electoral work and use of the crane. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention River Gold. River Gold was a lottery idea that Bev Butler brought back from St. Margaret's Bay, Nova Scotia. Bev saw this as a great opportunity to provide a financial boost to the society as well as other nonprofit organizations, which we partnered with the Exploits Valley SPCA and the Corduroy Brook Enhancement Association. And it was a local venture, was going to be a big one. Local businesses and people of our community. We quickly realized that this venture was going to be a big one. We brought in our fundraising manager, Dave Canning, who got us off the ground and running, and he continues to run a tight ship still. Little did we know at the time how River Gold would grow to and encompass some of our smaller surrounding communities and people, so much so that we have had to bring in other volunteer organizations to help on count days, to which the groups are compensated, spreading the River Gold love even further. Without River Gold, what you see here today would not be what it is. It has provided us with such an opportunity to create a center we are so very proud of, and the ability to showcase our heritage as it should be displayed. We are truly thankful to everyone who supports River Gold through their play every week, to those that volunteer their time on count days, and all the other time that goes in behind the scenes. It truly is a partnership of many people and organizations that have made the most successful fundraising group. Needless to say, it has been a long time coming. We are proud to call the former Mill Training Center our home. We have come leaps and bounds in the last 10 years with a great diverse group of volunteers. Thanks to Audrey Burke, our collections manager, and the crew that work under her, we are thrilled to finally be able to display our heritage in many forms to the people of Grand Falls, Windsor, and beyond. We are so happy to have the genealogy group back under the same roof as the society. We will be open to the public 7 days a week for this tourism season and 6 days a week for the remainder of the year. We will not be charging an admission fee. We only ask that you give us your suggestions. You may make a donation if you wish or sign up for a membership, which gives you voting rights at our annual general meeting and access to our very informative newsletter, The Mill Whistle, and a discount on our items that we sell. I'd like to call upon past President Barb Smith, past and now current Secretary Jim Dobson, and past President Ross Pomeroy to cut the ribbon to the center. And at this time, Cliff Thomas will also blow the mill whistle to signify the center is open.
Right here.